everywhere we go. But when the sinners find us, we won't hide.
They'll come loud and they'll come fast.
But we shoot first and we can last. Keep your rifle by your side. Singing, oh Lord, this earth was made for us. Singing, oh Lord, this sinful life just ain't enough. So we'll take a stand, 'cause we must protect our land. Keep your rifle by your side. They'll come day and they'll come night. They'll have our children in their sights. But if they don't have faith, their eyes are blind.
They can scream and they can shout, but they can never smoke us out.
Keep your rifle by your side. Singing, oh Lord, this earth was made for us. Singing, oh Lord, this sinful life just ain't enough. When we hear the voice, we know we have no other choice. Keep your rifle by your side.
They'll have bombs and they'll have tanks, 'cause they've got money in their banks. But we won't fall as long as we can fight.
They'll go on to preach their hate, but they won't get past the gate. Keep your rifle by your side. Singing, oh Lord, this earth was made for us. Singing, oh Lord, this sinful life just ain't enough. When I see your face, I know I must protect my place. I'll keep my rifle by my side. Singing, oh Lord, this earth was made for us. Singing, oh Lord, this sinful life just ain't enough. When I see your face, I know I must protect my place. I'll keep my rifle by my side. Keep my rifle by my side. Keep your rifle by your side.
Shut your ass! You will not laugh. You will not cry. You will learn by the numbers. I will teach you. Now get up!
Good evening, friends. It's Friday, which means it's time once again for another exciting and informative episode of Hobbservations on Roads to Liberty. Part of the Think Liberty Network. That's think-liberty.com for all of your freedom posting needs. Think-liberty.com, or swing on over to Roads, the number 2, liberty.com for some freedom swag. Buy our shit. It's pretty awesome. I designed some of it myself. You'll enjoy it, I know. Tonight, we got one of the other guys from one of our favorite people on the internet. We used to have Mike Shelby on here several times. I think 3, maybe 4 times. And now we've got one of his other buddies, an analyst that works over there at the always great, always informative, definitely worth your money to go ahead and subscribe, forwardobserver.com. We're talking to Dustin M. Sir, how are you doing this evening?
Hey, I'm doing well, man. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. It's cool. It's always cool. I like going on other people's shows because everybody does things a little different. And I like not doing just the straight playing the straight news, the news angle or analyst angle all the time. So I'm happy to be here, man.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, we'll have to shake things up a little bit. Have you and Max and Dan and any of the other people that I don't know about over there on the show some of these times. So before we jump right into whatever we're going to be talking about tonight, why don't you give us a quick rundown of who you are, where you work for, where people can find you, a bit of background, whatever you feel like this.
Yeah, sure. So I was in the Army for just around 10 years. I did a job called psychological operations. It sounds kind of spooky and scary, and it's a lot in the news right now. You hear about Russian disinformation and all that stuff. Well, I was one of those guys who did that for the government to other countries It was a pretty cool job. I fell into it just kind of on accident. I needed health insurance. This was back in like 2008, whenever the housing bubble was starting to burst, and I was just a young dumb kid with a baby on the way. So the Army was for me. And then retired out of that. Did a little time working in the public relations world. I worked for a congressman in Oklahoma for a while, helping him out in the district and stuff like that. Anytime they needed somebody to yell at the IRS or the Pentagon, they could always count on me to do that for them. Now I'm with Forward Observer, and I'm an analyst for them. I focus mainly on like politics here in the U.S. and then what's going on in Europe. I spent a little time in the Army working in Europe, particularly on what we're dealing with right now, and that's the war in Ukraine. So that's me in a nutshell. Oh, and where you can find me, I'm on Twitter. Yeah, I'm on Twitter and
Awesome,
and all that.
great.
If you just search for Dustin M, you'll be able to find me, or Forward Observer. Yeah, I'm easy to find.
That most of the people that are watching right now, we have a small but very tight-knit audience of ironic internet racists that follow us kind of regularly. I'm joking, of course. They're all pretty good guys. I'm sure that all of them know about Forward Observer, and like I said, we've had Mike on 3 or 4 times, and it's always good. People tune in and they really like that. But for anybody who may be new to the show or just listening to us for the first time or doesn't know what Forward Observer is, like I said at the beginning of the show, it's definitely worth the $10 a month that it takes to subscribe. You get an email every weekday morning. You get access to you guys' high side chats over on the website, and of course, you guys put out your free YouTube content, which is now up to two free shows a day that or every weekday or whatever, and that is always jam packed full of information. So yeah, if you guys out there, I see a few of you guys in the chat. If you guys aren't subscribed, get your ass over there. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Come on.
Well, we got so many.
So, anyways,
we got so many new people too. There's so many new people now on the team. Like, whenever I first started about a year ago working with the team, it was just a couple of us, and now there's 5 or 6 guys, and some of them their sole focus is like economics only, and it's really given me the freedom to kind of just focus on my one area, and I think that's making the depth of the content a little better. And hopefully people enjoy it, man. If you guys are Forward Observer subscribers, I really appreciate it, man. We couldn't do it without you guys. It's a hard go, man. I appreciate the support.
Yeah, we've got one guy over here that says he watches you every morning, but he hasn't made the jump over to the high side. Yeah, you need to get on that, man. Get off your ass. Do it. Yeah, but I sent you a couple of things, and you said that you guys talked about, like I told you in the pre-show. I didn't catch today's episode because I was running around doing errands for my job. But you said that you guys talked about this today, and this is this really weird string of food processing plants and storage facilities blowing up or getting burned down or whatever around the United States. I've seen various numbers. One place I saw said 16, another one said 20, another one said 24. So who knows what the actual number is or what they're counting as, a food processing plant or a storage facility or anything. But regardless of what the actual number is, more than one is a little concerning, especially with the food crunch that we've got going on in this country, around the world, really, right now. But we're hearing all this talk about, the supply line is stressed and food prices are going to go up for more reasons than just inflation and everything. And then to hear that there's this string of potential arsons or accidents, coincidences still happen. But yeah, so what are you seeing on that front right now? Because to me, I'm putting my tinfoil hat on and being like, you viva it the bugs,
Yeah. No, so that's kind of where my mind immediately went first too, because like you said, if it's 1 or 2, all right, stuff happens. If it's 10, all right, now I'm paying attention to it. And if it's, 20 or more, it's like, holy heck, okay, something's going on here. And so I did a little bit of digging into this. And one of the theories that's floating out there, it makes sense to me. So it's the one that I'm going to tell you about is, and we talked about this. It has to do with for the last 2 years of the pandemic shutdowns and the closures, being of restaurants, of, some mom and pop stores, things like that, these manufacturing facilities had to rapidly increase their production and then sustain that production, throughout the coast to coast closures. And so as a result, it's caused stress on their machines. Everything involved in the processing department of any type of foodstuffs is just being overworked, essentially, to a point where they're breaking down these machines or ignoring regular maintenance cycles to get them, keeping them operating smoothly so that they don't have like static electricity fires or anything like that. I have family who is in the agriculture business, and one of the big concerns whenever you get to using your grain elevators and transporting a lot of that stuff is the dust is highly flammable, and a small spark could kill a ton of people. Well, everybody in the vicinity, probably 3 or 4 guys, but the loss of life is still a concern. But then there's the conspiratorial side of it that I think is a little more interesting, because it hasn't all been fires. Like there's been a plane crash into one of these places, and it was a small plane, and maybe that was inexperienced pilot, whatever. You have to do an investigation on that. But it's also not just happening here in the United States right now. Like when you start digging into this, well, look at the Russian news today. There's a couple of big facilities that have caught on fire there recently, and it almost seems like there's a tit for tat going on behind the scenes from some of these maybe saboteurs, which would be more interesting, to say the least.
Confucius, the worst curse that you can put on another human being is "May you live in interesting times." And we're definitely living in some interesting times, and to think that there are saboteurs behind the scene, whether it be, like you said, a tit for tat, retaliatory strikes on the food supply chain by various governments with beef with each other, or, as my mind likes to wander into, one centralized global cabal to make us eat the bugs. Whatever it may be, it's definitely makes things more interesting. And so we're kind of cursing ourselves with the interesting stuff.
Yeah, so it's one of those situations where it's like any little disruption along the way can cause this ripple effect. So if one of these plants did burn down, like you got a ConAgra facility or whatever in your neighborhood that supplies the local Walmarts and stuff like that, if that burns down like that impacts people. It may not be like a choice of you're going to starve to death or something like that, but you get a little frustrated when you go to the grocery store and it's like, dude, I'm just trying to get some frozen biscuits and I haven't been able to buy them for 6 months. I feel people's frustration with that.
Yeah, it definitely does make the ripple effect. And this, yeah, you can't have your biscuits and gravy in the morning. What do you like? That just ruins your whole day when your breakfast sucks. But yeah, it does make a ripple effect. And this is something that Ben and I we talked about last night. We have a Thursday night show called This Week in Clown World, where we just look at stupid shit going on in the news and laugh at it and scratch our heads and offer our simple blue collar commentary to it. But yeah, something we talked about last night was that what we have now with things like just-in-time manufacturing and just-in-time supply delivery and everything, it's peak efficiency, but peak efficiency also requires peak stability. And 2019 through present day has taught us that the world is anything but a stable place right now, with urban race riots on up to a hot war in Eastern Europe. Everything is going to pot right now, and it's putting stresses on the system that, quite honestly, I'm kind of surprised hasn't collapsed already, because things are, they're not good. Things are not good. But yeah, we can dive into that, the Ukraine thing a little bit later. But one thing that I usually almost always talk to Mike about is on the domestic side, and I'd like to get your take on it too, is the what he calls the gray zone warfare, or the low level conflict that we have going on in the country now. It's simmering. It's on the back burner right now. Ever since the election and everything, the urban race riots suddenly dried up, and it doesn't seem like anybody outside of Portland is really acting a fool anymore. Do you guys have any more in-depth intel on what's going on that front with groups like, Antifa and Sunshine Coalition and all these other, neo-Bolshevik shitbags that are trying their damnedest to collapse our country?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've seen, like really, there has been a crackdown from the Justice Department on some of these people. Whether or not they ultimately serve any time is a totally other issue. But they're at least charging these guys and gals in some instances from coast to coast for their involvement in their destruction of federal property. And I think that the current administration is kind of doing that as an appeasement measure right before the election, because the conventional wisdom is that these groups have basically gone to ground for the past 6 to 9 months, maybe a little bit longer. And instead of doing those type of direct action assaults, what they're focusing on instead is like a community aid type events, mutual assistance group type stuff, where they put on and this is not a new thing. Like, they've been doing this for a while, putting on clinics on how to change your brake lights, shit like that. That's kind of what we see them doing, and I think that it's really gonna, after the primaries are over and the kind of the political landscape is what it is, we might see a little more political violence. Like candidates like Joe Kent out in Washington, I think is going to be a target of some of that, just because of his geographic area, and the proximity to a lot of those types of folks. But really, they've kind of taken a big step back. And the question is are they no longer politically useful to the administration, who knows they're going to get absolutely fucking mollywopped in November? Or is it that they're really waiting for 24 and potentially, the return of the great Satan, Donald Trump, once again, because that's what they're all betting on. And there's, a portion of the Republican Party who wants Trump to run again as well. And, that kind of remains to be seen. But I don't think we're going to see him get too crazy. Coast to coast, like we saw during like what Mike calls it, the Floyd Rebellion of summer 2020. I don't think we're going to see that level of violence again, because it's not as politically useful as it was, because Trump's not in office anymore. So this administration, they need to keep their brown shirts at bay.
Yeah, that is one of the things that's kind of a point of contention amongst a lot of political pundits, is whether or not there is some type of higher level conspiracy between members of the ruling class and the government and these low level foot soldiers going on. I mean, obviously, your Gage Grosskreutz type Antifa rioter isn't getting a text message from Joe Biden himself being like, "It is time," or anything like that. But these sorts of things, they're very centralized control, and then they trickle down. And that's one of the things that the left has always been really good at, is having this, almost like a hive mind for this type of community organizing and rioting and shit like that. And it's frustrating to deal with, but at the same time, it's something that I say pretty regularly, is that the reason that the right wing, if you want to use typical duopoly pronouns or whatever, the reason that the right wing is so shitty at organizing is because there's a direct correlation to the desire not to be ruled with the desire not to rule anyone else. And that's why organizing is so hard, because I don't want to tell anybody what to do, just as much as I don't want to have anybody tell me what to do.
Yeah, and those far left groups, they have like doctrine. Like the military has doctrine. These communists, they have their own doctrine. And that's the craziest thing, is right. As somebody who, leans to the political right on the spectrum, I mean, it's no secret that I'm like a right-leaning dude. I worked for a Republican congressman, right? Like that's just who I am. But one of the things that we've noticed is that, exactly like you said, people on the right don't like to oppress other people, and they don't want to be oppressed, certainly themselves. But the people who are on the far ideological left, and even it's even creeping its way kind of into the center, or at least what they purport to be their center nowadays anyway, is dude, they're hook, line, and sinker. Everybody knows the company mission. They all have their top 3 talking points. They have those things in the back of their pockets, sometimes literally in the back of their pockets, with little note cards like we used to hand out in Afghanistan, like telling people to, if you see an IED, call this phone number, we'll give you $5,000 or whatever, like so but they do the same thing. And that's why they can function in the absence of leadership, is because they drill it into themselves. Like they believe their own bullshit, basically.
chat. Mark D says, if Trump, oh, come on now, why'd you go? If Trump runs and wins again, how much violence do you see on the horizon? And he also says, when the right wing organizes, we commit war crimes like it's a family tradition. Disavow, disavow.
You're going to see people absolutely go batshit. They're going to lose their minds. They're not going to. They're not going to be happy. If you thought that his 2016 victory and that, you know, all the great memes that we got of liberals screaming into the air, et cetera, they're going to pale in comparison. I think that you would see something like January 6th on steroids, because we've seen it play out from coast to coast. They have the ability to organize. They have the ability to, you know, put together mass protests, blah, blah, blah. I think it's going to be off the charts.
Yeah, I agree. But what I'm more interested right now is in the short term is 2022, the midterm elections. I think is going to be where, you know, yeah, we're going to see if Trump runs and wins again, or basically if any populist right wing Republican candidate runs and wins in 2024, whether it be Donald Trump or DeSantis or, you know, any of these other kind of big names, you know, you're going to see 2016 snort a line of meth off a hooker's ass and then just run for the hills. But I think in 2024 is when things are also going to pop off big, because unless there is a level of voter and election fraud that is so obvious to put Democrats to keep them in control of the House and Senate, it's going to go Republican. I'm calling it right now, barring any type of blatant election fraud. That right there, you know, they're going to have control of two branches, or I mean, two houses of the legislative branch, and then the Democrat machine kind of grinds to a halt at that point. Not really, but kind of.
Well, you hope that it grinds to a halt. I mean, you know, Republicans, it is worth pointing out, you know, I'm a right-leaning dude, but I'll call out my own. They love to spend money just as much as the Democrats do. And, you know, you can make an excuse, you can make an argument that was justified during the pandemic. Maybe not, who knows, hindsight always being 2020, but the spending didn't just happen after the pandemic kicked off. It started as soon as Trump got into office. You know, recall he was pushing $1 trillion infrastructure package for his entire presidency. He never managed to get it through, of course, but man, I think the best hope is for the next, you know, 2 years after the midterms is that we have, like you said, a Republican controlled Congress and Senate, and the government just can get as little done as possible. Just absolutely as little done as possible. You know, I think DeSantis personally is going to be a better run in 24 than Trump, because he's not as much of a lightning rod. Although with, you know, what's been happening down in Florida and Disney and all that junk, you know, he may draw a lot more controversy than he would have otherwise. We'll see. I mean, it seems like it's a long ways away, but those campaigns are going to start in 23.
Yeah, and I think that what Ron DeSantis is doing down in Florida is less genuine outrage and more just hedging their bets against a potential DeSantis run, because anybody with two eyes that can read this bill that's making all of the people shit their pants down there, you know, it's like, oh, it's the don't say gay bill. And it's like, no, it's the don't talk about sex shit to 9-year-olds bill, you weirdos. Like,
yeah,
like, this has nothing to do with homosexuality unless you're tacitly admitting that homosexuality and pedophilia are inextricably entwined with one another, you know. And if that's the case, why do you hate gay people so much?
No, it is worth pointing out, but I think it's backfired on him, honestly. Like, I think DeSantis is going to wind up being more popular than ever with, you know, the so-called middle America folks who, yeah, whatever, man, like, they don't watch CNN all the time. They're not on Fox News. They don't, you know, record Tucker every single night and watch it over dinner with the kids, making sure that they're getting an education now that Limbaugh's gone, right? Like there are people who are just kind of like, hey, wait, what the fuck are you talking to my kid about? And they don't want anything to do with it. And those people are like, they're the ones who are starting to tune into politics a little bit more. And I think that's why there's a little bit of hope, kind of going back to the gray zone conflict thing. I think that's why it's not all lost here in America, because there's just so few people paying attention to what's going on around them. Never mind what's going on inside their government.
Yeah, I think that's all kind of the plan too. It's like, they've done a pretty good pincer maneuver with, on one hand, it's not so much that people are starting to pay attention to politics more. It's more that politics is intruding into every aspect of everybody's life. That's coming from one side. And then you've got the other side coming at you that's like, everything is more expensive. You got to make a dollar last longer, and you just don't have time to pay attention to what's going on over here, because putting food on the table over here is your number one priority. You don't want your kids to be like, Mom, I'm hungry, and there's nothing to give them anymore. So now we got this kind of enmeshing, and it is getting people to the boiling point where you may see more like the Floyd rebellions, only coming from the opposite side, and for real reasons, rather than just some half-baked AstroTurf bullshit from CNN flaming up everybody's tensions. Whatever, man.
What I'm concerned about is what they're going to try and get done in the 7 months that they have left. They're trying to get in whatever jackass over at the ATF. They're already making changes to what is a firearm, like changing the definition of what is a firearm and everything in between. And then it's looking like June, I think, is when they're gonna go after pistol braces, making a felon out of God knows how many millions of people, because they're like, dude, not everybody's going to have the time, inclination, or care to sit there and fill out all their ATF paperwork, pay a $200 tax stamp for a gun they bought 10 years ago. Like, I just don't see it happening. So if they don't grandfather people in, I think you're right. A lot of communities are reaching a boiling point, and I'm not saying anybody needs to lose their cool or lose their mind or anything, but it is something where it's like, what else do you let the government do? Because just like, God damn, it was 2 years of 2 weeks to slow the spread, and like that I have friends and family that drove them crazy, like literally crazy, had to get removed from their home, put in the booby hatch for a couple weeks to chill out and be like, okay, are the jackbooted thugs coming to take me away? I don't know, but they did. So, and I still can't go to a concert. Not everybody's super mentally strong all the time, and whenever you mess up their comfortable little world that they have going on, it can send people over the edge. And geez Louise, they're trying to bring masks back on flights. When are these people going to learn? I do not get it. I don't get it. It blows my mind. It's almost like it's on purpose.
Yeah. That we live in a country with a government that respects people's rights and boundaries. Gosh darn it. But you were talking about how the ATF is going with procedural and definition terms to change what is a firearm in the pistol braces and everything like that. And that's my sphere of expertise is firearms and stuff. I'll geek the fuck out. I was in the Army for 9 years, and that's what I did. I was a small arms repairman. So that's all. Well, it's not all that I know, but it's a good chunk of what takes up the old hard drive between my ears here. But one thing I don't think that them doing a definition change at the ATF level is going to survive scrutiny at the Supreme Court, because things like the definition of what is a firearm it's not up to the ATF. That is something that was passed by Congress and signed into law by a president. So unless that they amend those things at the congressional level, I don't think that's going to survive Supreme Court scrutiny. The pistol brace thing, though, that is more up in the air. And they'll probably do the same thing that they did with like forced reset triggers and bump stocks and stuff like that. And at that point, we get back to a question that I ask a lot of our guests is, we have all of these people that bend over backwards to follow the rules. What is the point where they can't bend anymore and they just won't anymore? What is going to be that line in the sand where they're like, you know what? I keep following the rules and you guys keep changing them. So fuck it. I'm drilling the third hole. I'm putting a stock on it. Try and stop me. You can't stop all of us type of thing. The Storm Area 51 approach, I guess. So what do you think that red line?
I think
if we
get
red
our
line is going to be,
if we get our Naruto runners in the right spot, we might have a chance against the ATF. But barring that, dude, I think it's mandatory buybacks. I think that's like, we're going to get to that point where they're going to issue some kind of regulation saying that, you're the firearm that you've legally possessed for however, it doesn't matter if it's a day, it doesn't matter if it's 100 years, been in your family. I don't give a shit. They're going to get to a point where they're going to make some kind of rule or regulation not coming out of the Congress, and they're going to institute a mandatory buyback program for a certain type of firearm. And I think that at the point, you're going to see mass non-compliance. I don't think you're going to see, people smoking ATF agents or anything like that. Like people aren't stupid, right? There are stupid people, but the people who are involved in that situation, they're not the kinds who typically just take up arms and run off and do something hasty. There'll be mass non-compliance, and like you said, a lot of the aftermarket manufacturers or even primary manufacturers of a lot of these components, they're going to sue the dog shit out of the federal government, just like they did with these mandatory vaccines. I hope we don't get nuked on YouTube for saying the V word, but the private sector did stand up to the federal government, not only in the federal contracting space, but elsewhere. And they got that, temporary injunction filed pretty quickly. And then it slowly but surely it went away. And I think that we're going to see that happen because surely there are cooler heads inside of the executive branch who realize that if they continue to mess with these regulations and try to make new legislation from an executive agency, that they're gonna be on the wrong side of history, and they're gonna be on the wrong side of the American people. That's
Well, the coolest head is Joe Biden in the executive branch. He's
room temperature.
Smooth. It's like an ice. Right, exactly. It's just like an ice rink. Everything just skates right off of that guy. But yeah, so just gonna quickly and unceremoniously switch gears here back to the midterm elections coming up. Now, something that Ben and I talked about last night is I think that they're doing a case study in whether or not they can get away with something that's just so smooth-brained that it defies physics. Down in Georgia with Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're trying to disqualify her from the ballot on 14th Amendment. And I facetiously told Ben last night, I said, I don't know how old the woman is, but I don't think she was rubbing elbows with Robert E. Lee. And that's what that clause in the 14th Amendment was all about, was to keep Confederate generals and congressmen and everything from running for office again and just putting us right back in the same spot. So, like I said, I think that it's going to be a case study of whether or not they can actually get away with something like this. And if they do, they're going to expand it to anybody who just more or less tangentially said anything positive about what happened on January 6th. Do you agree with that? And do you think that that's basically the Democratic Party trying to criminalize dissent, or do you think this is going to kind of cool off before we get to the midterms?
So this is one of the far left's favorite techniques. It's called lawfare. It's where they use the law, legal interpretations, old obscure cases, whatever, to bring some kind of suit or otherwise drag the name of a politician or public figure through the mud. And we've seen this play out. We saw it play out for 4 years during the Trump administration, and even after the administration, when they tried to impeach him, they impeached him twice, and then now they're trying to do it with the January 6th investigation. The problem with Marjorie Taylor Greene, now take this with a grain of salt because I'm not a lawyer, right? I just read the back of a Wheaties box this morning, but unless she's been convicted of a crime or convicted of what they're actually saying she did, trying to overthrow the government, then you're exactly right. The Constitution, speaks to this, and it's like everything else. It's going to get taken to a higher court. This one probably won't ever go to a Supreme Court. It'll go to a district court, and they'll say, read your damn law books and kick it back down and say we're not wasting our time with this. Because the problem that it introduces is that if we have a state legislature, state, whatever state level entity that is starting to take federal officials off of the map from representing the people who voted for them, then you have then you have an actual constitutional crisis. Then you have an actual issue where the states are undermining the ability of the federal government to do its basic functions, and that's vote on bills, pass bills, whatever. And there's a reason why congressmen come and go, between terms all the time, either due to they got caught doing something unethical, cheating on their wives, whatever it was, laundering money, anything like that. But they don't usually step down until they know that the case against them is sealed, and they're going to be they're going to get off somehow and not do any time or anything like that. But their political career is over, and they're not going to be able to do the same thing to Marjorie Taylor Greene down there because they haven't found her guilty of any crime. So what they're doing is just using lawfare, sucking up a bunch of resources from her personally, not from her office, hopefully, because that will impact the constituents there. This is just a game. It's a game that they're going to play for the next 2 years. The problem is if they're successful, then what stops Texas from getting rid of all of the Democrats that are surrounding Houston, or people like Dan Crenshaw who have really alienated a lot of their voting base, even though they're on the Republican side of the aisle? So if that's a problem, well, then why do we amend the Constitution to allow the direct election of senators? Because obviously the states want to be involved in this shit, or they're going to keep nuking what happens in the House. So you got to draw the line somewhere, and I don't think all the states are ready for that.
Election of senators, because that one right there is one that other than the 16th Amendment and the income tax, the 17th Amendment, that's one that needs to be repealed. Give the states back their power. But yeah. I think that the deal with Marjorie Taylor Greene and her re-election bid right now being potentially undermined by on 14th Amendment insurrection grounds, legally speaking, and again, I'm not a lawyer either, but legally speaking, not being convicted of a crime of insurrection, which is what is spelled out in that clause of the 14th Amendment, it really throws a monkey wrench in there. But then you've also got the court of public opinion as well, which I think is the real reason that they're hammering this January 6th thing so hard, trying to convince people that it was a legitimate insurrection trying to overthrow the duly elected government of the United States, and not just a bunch of MAGA meemaws who got a little squirrely for whatever reason. If they can convince people that this was an insurrection, this is what an insurrection looks like. Don't pay any attention to the burning cities behind us or anything. This is an insurrection. But they can convince people that was an insurrection, then they can go about maligning somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has a high public profile, as an insurrectionist in order to disqualify her from ever holding any kind of public office again. Well, then, it's game on. All they need is their sycophantic toadies in the media to be like, that guy was an insurrection on Twitter on January 6th. Yeah, he was in bumfuck Arkansas on January 6th of 2021, but he tweeted out, hey, this is pretty awesome. He's an insurrection. He can never run for office again. And I think that's what they're actually going for here. But, I could be wrong. What's your opinion on that?
I think so one of the things we've noticed is how slow these prosecutions and trials have been coming. The courts may be backlogged, they may be backed up, but they don't have to wait 800 days to charge somebody for a crime if they have a file on it before that. The reason they're doing that, again, it's that same lawfare strategy where they're trying to keep all of this January 6th news in the top of the news cycle, so it's in that first scroll down on whatever news page you go to, because you're exactly right, they want to keep that idea of an insurrection, of a true threat to democracy in the top of the mind. And what is that functionally? It's an influence operation that we're seeing waged in conjunction not only with far left activists inside of the government, but far left activists inside of the media structure. Like, I mean, the ones we're on right now. And it's like really crazy to think about. But as far as Marjorie Taylor Greene's concerned, it's not like the Democrats have any chance in hell of flipping that district. Because while we were talking, I looked it up, and the Republicans won that district by about 150,000 votes or so, in a total vote of like 300,000 votes. So they won pretty handedly with that. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, she might not be reelected, and some other Republican might be elected in her stead. But I don't think that the Democrats are going to succeed in flipping districts with the idea of a great insurrection against us. I just don't see it holding water. I think the majority of people kind of understand. They're like, well, yeah, there was some rioting that happened there, but not everybody was rioting there. Like, I mean, I know people who were at the Capitol that day, and they're like, they're retirees. They were walking on the mall, and then that was it. And then they went home, they waved their flag, and they chanted their chants, and then they left. And I think that if you started to see a broad public targeting of people like that for, just trying to ruin people's lives, basically, that's going to alienate a lot of folks. That's going to put a real sour taste in everybody's mouth, because it's going to always, it's always that what if the shoe is on the other foot situation, right? Like, okay, well, Trump wasn't my guy. Fine and dandy. But, AOC in 2030 or 2032 that's who my money's on. And I really want to see her in office. So, am I going to get arrested for supporting Comrade Cortez there in the Washington Mall when the red banners come down? Like, is that what's going to happen? And that's going to push a lot of people away, man.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One question that kind of floats in my mind is they're harping on the January 6th things. January 6th, January, and midterms are coming, this year, this November, and January 6th was a year and a half ago. So do you really think that with the news cycle being what it is, with news comes at you, the story changes every 5 minutes. Do you really think that they're going to keep up this January 6th insurrection narrative for another 7 months without people just being like, okay, guys, you have beat this dead horse into a pulp. It's time to let it go. Our democracy is still safe, and you guys just need to kind of move on a little bit. MoveOn.org, wasn't that one of their things?
No, they're definitely still around. But you would think, you would hope, if you were a strategist sitting inside a political office, a think tank, whatever, sitting inside a production room for a news program on pick your favorite liberal outlet, you would hope that they're saying, dude, we got to talk about something else. But then the problem comes in, what else do you talk about? You can't talk about the economy. You can't talk about gas prices. You can't talk about the future of the economy. You can't talk about how great international relations are, as China's stomping our dick into the dirt at every opportunity they get, right? Like you can't. What do they hang their hats on? So, yeah, and like as a pretty open-minded, political strategist guy, that's where my mind is. I'm thinking, like, what would I run on? And they don't have anything else. They don't have anything else to run on. The immigration, what's going on at the border, it's a nightmare. Drugs coming into the country, absolute nightmare. Supply chain concerns, nightmare. Cybersecurity vulnerabilities, now that goes over multiple administrations, of course. Absolute nightmare, right? Like all these, it's a red chyron on the screen every single time. It's a Fox News alert every single time they come back from a commercial, because there's like nothing positive to talk about. And So yeah, I mean they have to slow walk it out. They're going to keep going after guys like the Proud Boy dude Tario. So they got Tario, right, and he may have been an FBI informant, may have not been an FBI informant, whatever. I'm not here to litigate that dude's private life, but they've also gone after a lot of his acolytes and his lieutenants, as it were, in the organization. And some of them are individuals who may have not even been in the Capitol, but they facilitated movement to the Capitol. And so as a result, the Justice Department and the current administration and Democrats can keep trickling these dudes out one by one. And they only need one every 2 weeks to really keep it in the news, because it'll stay in the news for about 72 hours. And then they can talk about, little Sally in Arizona lost her kitty cat and the National Guard went down to the border and saved it. Whatever. They'll have a feel good puff piece here and there. But other than that, they're going to keep tying it back to these Republicans are a threat to democracy. These Republicans are a threat to the country as we know it. And, unfortunately, it appears that the country as we know it is headed toward some sort of socialist fucking hellscape. And I really don't see it playing out any other way. But according to the party in power, that's absolutely what they want. They want more government control. And you said it earlier in the show, and I can't recall exactly what the topic was, but, it's really about the role of the government in the life of the individual is the fundamental difference at the end of the day. Well, I say fundamental difference. If you take the conservatives and the right leaning people at their truest sense, and then the far left types at their truest sense, or what we see on the extremes, there's a party that wants to control everything you do, and there's a party that wants to leave you alone. And it's really a hard argument for them to say we need more control over your life right now if there's not some kind of threat. COVID's gone. They're trying to start World War III. I don't know if it's going to do it or not, but they're trying. So they need something to make people afraid of and make them run to the Democrat Party for safety. And I think it's going to be this insurrection crap for the midterms.
Run on, and I do have one thing: no more mean tweets. We got that to look forward to. But that should be like the CNN Chiron. It's like, good news, still no more mean tweets. So before we jump on a plane and head over to Eastern Europe, the land of sunshine and roses, let's go up here a little bit and we'll see if we have any questions. I saw a few, but we were getting into such a good conversation there that I didn't want to interrupt us. So let's see. Luke says that the problem with the Libertarian Party organizing is we're too busy arguing who the real libertarians are. Yeah, I feel that. As a guy who ran for Congress as a libertarian and attended a few conventions myself, you are 100% spot on right there. Let's see. Poof, riot out of thin air. Yeah, that was kind of a hallmark of the Floyd riots. Was one second a town is perfectly peaceful, and next thing you got pallets of bricks and black clad weirdos rioting and burning shit down. So now we'll have the peaceful but mostly fiery protests. Yes, definitely. Let's see here. 1776 is now wrong think according to the commies. Definitely. That happened a long time ago. Over under of even making it to 2024 without a global conflict, financial meltdown, or lights out. That's a good question. What do you think about that?
I think, man, that's a tough one. That's a good question. Man, 2024, that's a long time away. I hate being right about stuff, so I want to be positive. If I want to be right, I want to be positive. I think we're going to be okay. I think we're going to get to 2024. I don't think Joe Biden is going to make it to 2024. What does that mean? What does that mean for the rest of us? I think we're going to have to suffer through probably about 18 months of Kamala Harris, and then some kind of Republican victory in 24. If it's Trump, I think it's going to be awful. It'll be chaos here in the streets. Not everywhere, of course. There are plenty of places that won't have a problem with it, but there are cities, oddly enough, that wouldn't have voted for the guy anyway. They're going to burn their cities to the ground again. I think we're going to see that. Is there going to be another global conflict? Dude, I think that might happen before 2023. If my money's on anything, I don't think we're going to make it to 24 without at least some U.S. boots on the ground somewhere.
masks back on flights is to keep the blood spray from the fist fights to a minimum because Delta Airlines is the next televised fight stuff. Yeah, definitely. Like, did you see that video? Mike Tyson just rocking that dude's shit.
Yeah. Well,
of all the people that you're gonna mess with,
like you think Mike
like
Tyson
he's
can't
easy
beat
to
an
mistake
assault
for
charge?
somebody.
Well, it's like I mean, like you think Mike didn't have enough money to beat an assault charge on an airplane, no matter how many cameras are on there. Like, dude, all you did was embarrass yourself.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Let's see. We got some other ones here. Orange man bad. Orange man bad. Orange man bad.
Don't you forget it.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. They will tell you that as much as they possibly can. So yeah, like I said, let's hop on the airplane and fly over to Eastern Europe for a nice little vacation in the sunflower fields. One question that Ben and I have been kind of asking back and forth is, with everything that's going on in Russia right now. And again, I'm gonna go ahead and put on my tinfoil hat here real quick and ask the question, because Russia, Ben said this last night, Russia does not seem like the kind of country that is going to commit this level of troop casualties, materiel loss, bad publicity on the world stage and everything, because a few ethnic Russians are getting bullied by their government in Ukraine. So it makes me wonder what it is in that part of the world that they're trying to find. Do you have any insight on that or anything? Because, to contrast it, we've got, 497,000 Yemenis are being slaughtered by the Saudi Arabians with guns that we sold them. You got 1.6 million Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps, like Auschwitz-style concentration camps in China. Nobody gives a shit. You got famines and starving and genocides all over the world. Nobody cares. It's never in the news. But as soon as Putin gets a little froggy on his own border, suddenly it's the end of the fucking world. So, what is over there that the Russians are spending so much time and resources trying to find? And what is over there that our government and our media is putting so much of their credibility and resources on the line, making us aware of what's going on over there in the hopes that whatever it is not found?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I think what Russia is trying to find is the Soviet Union. I think Russia is trying to find maybe not a Soviet style union, but definitely what Russia refers to as the Union State. I've been on that bandwagon for, I don't know, years at this point. Because when I was in the Army, I was a Eastern Europe guy. So this is something that we've been aware of for a long time, and they've made a lot of proactive steps toward that. Not only inside the war in Ukraine, but also their relationship with Belarus and some of their so-called peacekeeping operations that they did over in Kazakhstan. Because what Russia's trying to do is get the gang back together. And why do they want to get the gang back together? What does Ukraine have like physically on its territory that they want? Well, they have a couple of things. Number one, you hear it talked about all the time: breadbasket of the world, breadbasket of the Soviet Union, etc. That's very true. It is extraordinarily true. Between Russia, the United States, and Ukraine, we're the top 3 wheat producers in the world. Now, that doesn't mean a lot necessarily for us here at home. What's a war in Ukraine look like for us? It means, well, okay, my fucking General Mills cereal is going to cost a little bit more, and a loaf of bread might cost a little bit more. But what it means strategically for the United States is that all those other shithole countries around the world that depend on Ukraine for their wheat exports and things like that, they have other exports too, but wheat primarily being one of the big exports, is that if they don't get the food delivered to those countries are going to be on fire in a matter of months. There's I think, I can't remember if it was Mike or Max that said it on one of the Ford Observer shows, but it's kind of a phrase or saying at this point. There's nothing scarier than a parent trying to feed a hungry child, and that could happen at communities here in the States, of course, in an SHTF scenario, but it's way more likely to happen in sub-Saharan Africa. Pick a East Asian country where they rely on Ukrainian or Russian exports, ag exports particularly, and those countries are going to go up in flames in a fucking heartbeat. Yeah, you mentioned the war that Saudi Arabia is waging right now with a lot of U.S. support. Nobody talks about that because they don't care about the human capital. Because a country like Yemen, unfortunately, what do they really bring to the table? They don't have a shitload of palladium. They don't have a ton of wheat. They don't have this like crazy high water table that allows them to have little to no rainfall for months on end, but be able to grow some of the best agriculture crops in the world. And sunflower oil is another one. I always forget about sunflower oil because like it's used in potato chips and stuff like that, and I don't eat those all the time. My wife does. She loves potato chips, but that's neither here nor there. Dude. So what is the U.S. trying to keep us away from? Well, there's the obvious issues. We have all these Soviet facilities that were doing bioweapons research in the since God knows when, and we for some reason haven't managed to decommission those things in 30 something years. That one doesn't pass the smell test initially, and then just regional security. We want to act like NATO matters. We want to act like the United States still matters. And with the current political leadership, we're having a hard time making that case because I keep bringing up the last guy, but the last guy probably wouldn't have handled this situation the same way. That doesn't mean that he would have sent U.S. boots to go fight in Ukraine or soldiers to go fight in Ukraine, anything like that. But it wouldn't have happened after the bang, after the war re-kicked off, or they started invading on 3 fronts inside of Ukraine. I think you would have seen a lot more united global response because you would have had a U.S. that was able to provide leadership. And so what is the U.S. searching for anymore? Its own fucking sense of self-worth on the global stage at this point, because we are quickly being cast aside for countries like China.
Like, again, the tinfoil hat wearer in me wants to think that there's some type of like blackmail information, or you brought up the not decommissioned Soviet biological weapons labs. That that right there is another big key that a lot of the more conspiratorial minded people are like, you had 30 years to do this, and with what happened with the Wu flu that hit us last year, and it's looking like it's almost a certainty, like a 99% certainty that thing was engineered in a lab and we helped to fund it. It's like, what other god awful things are you concocting in these old Soviet labs, and what's going to be the next shoe to drop on that foot? Yeah, that's it's terrifying to think about.
It really is.
Could be done, and obviously Russia doesn't need. Yeah, obviously Russia doesn't need those facilities. I'm sure they've got their own facilities within their own borders, but the potential PR disaster that would take place if Russian troops took control of these facilities and found concrete evidence that was irrefutable and undeniable on the world stage that the United States is doing something like developing race-specific bioweapons that will annihilate, one particular ethnic group or another, which is a total possibility because they've said that there were U.S. CDC officials taking tissue samples from pure Slavic volunteers in the Ukraine like 7 or 8 years ago. So it's like, what do you need that for? Oh, nothing. Don't look at the man behind the curtain or anything like that. But shifting gears a little bit about the war effort that Russia's going on right now. We were told, ever since Trump got into office that Russia's, even before that, Mitt Romney was on the Russia is our number one global foe and they're an existential threat to the United States and blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about China. It's all Russia. And, we were told that they're our number one threat. And then we see this invasion of Ukraine, and it looks like they're just really bad at this. So they're either our number one existential threat or they suck at war. Which one is it? And why do we have the perception that the Russians are ill-equipped, underfunded, undertrained, malnourished? They don't have fuel. The tires on their trucks are blowing out because nobody's maintained anything. Like, why do they suck so bad at this?
Well, I think the number one reason is the same problem that the Ukrainians suffer from, and that's corruption. it's corruption. Whenever you take away market driven incentives for individuals to succeed. Now, I'm not saying there's not any corruption in our defense apparatus, because there absolutely is. But by and large, we make sure that our shit works pretty good before we bring it into the battlefield. One of the other big problems that the Russians had. One of the other big problems that they had was that they totally restructured their military order of battle before the conflict. So they used to use like multi-domain forces like we use here in the United States. That's, you're going to send in your long range fires and then, airplanes and then until you get to your ground troops, kind of like we saw the Germans do in World War II, the whole blitzkrieg idea, right? Like there's a reason why so many countries use a similar model, is because it's so effective. But I gotta say but and take a drink. Sorry, man. But the Russians reorganized into what they called these battalion tactical groups. And the battalion tactical group kind of mirrored the U.S. brigade combat team. Now, if you're not familiar with any of that stuff, just very briefly, what it is that you have a little infantry unit, engineer unit that can handle like any construction or demolition tasks, things like that. And then you have a little artillery unit, and then maybe a little electronic warfare section or something like that. And so the Russians try to do the same thing, introduce all this whiz bang technology. But the problem with the Russians is they don't have an NCO corps that can sit there and organize a squad of dudes and tell them what to do. My experience working with former Soviet militaries and Eastern European militaries is they don't have NCOs. They don't have non-commissioned officers. That's like, if you're not familiar, it's all your sergeants, it's your petty officers, it's those guys, the ones who are doing the sausage making there on the day-to-day side of things. And they don't wait for an officer to have to tell them, yeah, you can go to the bathroom right now. They're like, in the United States anyway, but in the Soviet world or in the post-Soviet militaries, a lot of times they're like, I mean, these guys, they, if a major comes walking down the hallway and you're a senior enlisted fellow with 30 something years in service, well, you snap to and get to the edge of the hallway and make sure that officer can pass. And as a result, we've seen that the decision-making ability of the individual unit has been completely stripped. And what does that mean? Well, that means when your guys want to go start looting and raping and doing all sorts of wazoo shit like that, they're going to. They're not going to stay mission focused. They're not going to stay focused on seizing whatever the objective is, in the same way that a professional military force, like we've seen from the West throughout, the entire global war on terror. Now, there's, some guys are a little better than others. Maybe some units had a psychopath who couldn't stop raping Iraqi women or something like that. But guess what? We have a justice system that likes to handle people like that and get them out of the fucking ranks, because in war, there's enough crazy stuff going on. People are getting maimed and killed and blown up, blah, 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 et cetera, whatever. If you can't maintain a mission focus, you're not going to be successful. And that's what we saw the Russians do.
Yeah, they tried to mirror the Western tactical doctrine without mirroring the Western leadership organizational structure. And you're right. That is one of the things. And I've talked to Ben about this like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. Is one of the things that makes Western militaries in general and the United States military in particular is that a private out on foot patrol in Afghanistan in the hills or whatever has the authority to call in an airstrike if they absolutely need it. And if you need it, you call it in, you put your initials on the call for fire, and if you fuck up, it's on you. Your initials are there, but Private Snuffy can call it in if he needs it. Eastern European and ex-Soviet militaries and the Chinese military and everything, it's brigade commander level, and it's got to trickle up through the chain of command and then trickle that back down through the chain of command, and by then your squad is hamburger on the side of the road and the air support never comes. And that I think is probably one of the number one reasons why the Russian military seems to be doing so bad is like you said, they don't have an NCO corps that can make those snap on the ground decisions. Another reason that I think they're probably not doing as good as we initially thought they would is a friend of mine up in Wisconsin. He's a Russian immigrant. He was a member of the Russian army like right after the Soviet Union collapsed. He was one of the first guys in the new Russian Federation army. And he said that what's going on in Ukraine right now is the way that they're fighting is completely outside of the normal Russian tactical doctrine, and that's exactly what you said when you first got into your answer. It's like, their tactical doctrine is send in the artillery, send in the bombers, blow shit up, break their stuff, and then send in the troops. And it looks like the Russian military now is trying to avoid as much of that as they can, whether it's to keep infrastructure intact, to keep civilian casualties to a minimum, or to, maybe preserve some type of intelligence gathering that they're wanting to do on the ground. But that, in addition to their ill-maintained equipment, lack of an NCO corps, and the operating outside of their tactical doctrine, and they're just getting their shit pushed in this war, and it is not looking good for them on the public stage.
Yeah, they're gonna take. It's gonna be decades before they recover from this. I mean, it doesn't matter ultimately if Putin is successful in achieving his goal. My money is still on what Russia wants to do, is to take up to that river that bisects the country. It's called the Dnieper River, and then of course, you've heard all the commentary talking about it, a land bridge through Odessa, maybe over to Transnistria, effectively landlocking Ukraine. And now what does that mean? Okay, do they let Ukraine recover? I mean, maybe, but then that means that Russia is going to get a piece of everything that comes through their territory to get to port. So Russia may just come out on top from this economically, ultimately, because the world is going to be forced to do business with them. But from a diplomatic standpoint, it's going to be a hard road. And people here in the West, they're talking about, well, the Russians just need to rise up and kick Putin out. And it's like, well, I mean, do they want that? Do the Russian people want that? Like, if you look at public polling, Putin has his drawbacks, and there's, of course, nobody's going to get over 90% approval or anything like that. But he's not an unpopular figure, and one of the main reasons why he's not so unpopular that there hasn't just been another color revolution inside of Russia, this century, is that he cares about his country. He expresses to his people whether or not any of it's legitimate. And he's just like, nah, dude, I got like $30 trillion stashed away in a secret cave in the Ural Mountains that, in a castle inside that cave. Like, whatever his bad guy takeaway from all this is what it is. But he's convinced people at least that he gives a shit about them, and that he cares about, Russian standing, and he wants to restore Russia to be a great global power, because we're not so far removed from the Soviet times that people don't remember when the world used to equate the Soviet Union and the United States together. And, it gives people a lot of pride. It can give folks a lot of pride to think back on those times when they weren't just a laughing stock on the global stage with an economy the size of Florida's.
Why are you giving Russia the benefit of the doubt? This was years and years ago, before any of this happened. And he's like, why are you giving Russia the benefit of the doubt? It's like, well, because, I can empathize with the people of Russia. Like, we look at Putin as a bad guy, and, he certainly probably is a bad guy. But you look at it from the standpoint of a normal Joe on the street in Russia, and it is probably a sense of pride that they get, that their leader is willing to be the bad guy on the world stage in a world dominated by Western media. He's willing to be the bad guy, to do what is seen by many as what is best for Russia, even if it comes at the expense of other countries around the world or anything. And this was like at the tail end of the Obama administration. And they said, you know what? I wish I had a president that loved our country as much as Putin seems to love Russia. And that kind of shut my friend up pretty quick. He's like, oh, yeah, I guess that kind of makes a little bit of sense. So we're a little bit past an hour now. We like to kind of keep these things at an hour now. Before we close out, my buddy up in Wisconsin, he was telling me that, the conquering of Ukraine is not really Putin's goal. He wants Donbass, he wants Crimea, he wants that little strip that runs through Mariupol to kind of connect the two and make the Russian borders contiguous and everything. And that's what he initially wanted, and this war has dragged out longer than anybody has really wanted it. So what do you think is going to be I guess, how long do you think this is going to end out, or how long do you think that this is going to go on for? When do you think it's going to end? And do you think at the end of this that Donbass through Mariupol down into Crimea is going to remain in Russian hands? Is it going to be an independent, like the Donetsk and Luhansk independent republics, or do you think that they're going to come to some kind of an international Hague style bargaining table and cede that land back to Ukraine under the condition of Ukraine not joining NATO or the EU?
Yeah, I think Putin is, like you said earlier, he's expended so much blood and treasure in this venture that he has to succeed, and maybe it's not their original definition of success. I'm going to go a step further. I think they're going to take all the way over to Odessa. Odessa is one of those things that I kept an eye on early on in the war. Not only because it's a beautiful city, it's a beautiful city there on the with some nice beaches and things like that, but it's also a very strategically important target. We've seen the Russians, do some preparatory fires, and we thought that they were going to succeed in taking territory a lot faster than they really did, and that's something that we really just have to go back to the drawing board here with our calculations from kind of like the analyst world. I'm one of those unfortunate bastards. I get to hang my hat on correctly picking the date within 90 days of it kicking off. But as far as how long the thing's going to last, I think it's going to be at least another year. And the reason why, folks like to count Russia out. They think Russia's back is up against a wall, and it may be sometimes, but they got a lot more troops. They have a lot more people available that they can just throw bodies at the situation, like we've seen the Russians do in conflicts past. I mean, everything from Afghanistan in the 70s all the way back to World War II and World War I before that, before the Soviet Revolution and things like that. Like, that's just how the Russians fight wars, and I don't think that they're gonna give it up. I don't think that any ground that Putin has gained as of now, I don't think he's going to give it up unless the tactical situation becomes so untenable that they simply cannot survive in the area, like we kind of saw happen outside the capital. Totally on the other side of the country. I don't think they're gonna give it up, and I think the West is ultimately going to convince Ukraine, like, hey, look, you put up a good fight, you did a good job. We're going to help you with reconstruction. Let them have it. You're not going to take it back. We're not going to help you take it back. Talk to me again in 25 years.
The expenditure of troops and material and whatnot. And that was one other thing that I wanted to get your insight on was, we're seeing a lot of like T-72s, T-80s. Troops are equipped with the brand new AK-12, but none of them have optics or lasers. None of these troops have night vision or thermals. We're seeing these troop carrying trucks that look like they were built in the late 1960s or whatever. It's like Russia has more advanced stuff. Why are they not using any of their good stuff at this? Are they trying to just get as much of their shit blown up? Or is it better to? I made this joke a while back, but I mean, maybe it's true. Like, maybe it's better to throw their old equipment into the meat grinder and get it destroyed than it is to sell it to some tin pot third world country and then have that decision come back to bite you in the ass 20 years down the line. Kind of like what happened in Afghanistan when we armed the Mujahideen, and then they turn around and have our guns from 30 years ago that they're shooting at us in 2001 and 2002. So, like, what do you think the rationale is of throwing poorly trained conscript troops with 30-year-old equipment when they have good stuff that they could be using to make this go a lot faster?
It's that meat grinder. It's a meat grinder strategy. They didn't think that the Ukrainians would put up a fight, and the Russians kind of I assume they hedged their bets a little bit and said, well, okay, we watch CNN as well. We were subscriber number 10,000 over at CNN Plus. Saw somebody talking about that in the comments, but it's like, they saw all the weapons that the West was delivering. They knew that, NATO members had a training operation inside of Ukraine operating for 8 years. training the Ukrainians how to fight the Russians either in the eastern part of the country or in some kind of future conflict. And the beauty of what the Ukrainians had on their side is that they were able to rotate guys in and out of their front line and get them a lot of combat experience, a lot of battlefield experience, a lot of exposure to what it means to have artillery come down on your head in an effective fashion. And as a result, I think the Russians really underestimated what the Ukrainian capabilities were going to be fighting on their home turf. It's of course way easier to be in a defensive position from a combat scenario. Like those of you who participated in the global war on terror, it's sometimes can be a little less scary when you've got guys trying to get into your compound, but you have a dude sitting on every rooftop just laying down the hate on them, versus if you're out on patrol in the middle of nowhere and then you start taking effective PKM fire or whatever the weapon system is. So the Ukrainians are more battle hardened, I think, than people gave them credit for, because the war had been going on for 8 years already. People here in America, they really forgot about that, but that was I was still in the Army at the time when that happened, and we had people, the United States at least, we were still under Obama, so they weren't really doing anything, but we were able to get people into country in 12 hours. Well, we got them outside the United States in 12 hours, and then they got over to Ukraine a little bit after that. But it was one of those situations where we could have done a lot more. But now I think we're just going to let them. They're just at the meat grinder. And the Ukrainians, they don't have the luxury of having having all of Russia's equipment spread out across 11 time zones. One of the things I'm concerned about, though, is that we haven't seen the same number of videos coming across TikTok and Telegram and things like that showing all this equipment being line hauled, on rail to the front or to near the front where they can get employed in battle. We haven't really seen that play out, and I don't know if it's just because it's not happening or if because people aren't filming it anymore. I don't think they're done yet. I think they got another.
That'd be an interesting thing to look at. Person asked, "You guys think the EU will stop buying Russian oil and gas?" I don't think the EU can afford to stop buying Russian oil and gas, honestly, unless they can get something from the Middle East. No, that's people were going to freeze to death before that happens. Doubt the EU is going to stop buying product. Yeah, exactly.
Well, even NATO, because like Hungary is one of those countries that's like a NATO ally. Like we have missions in Hungary, right, trying to reduce the spread of Russian influence. But they came out and said, they're like, dude, we're not stopping Russian oil and gas imports because it's 85% of our oil and gas imports. Like we can't. And that's when reality comes and smacks you in the face in geopolitics.
Yep. Everything got so interconnected, and I said to Ben last night, I'm like, let's give the globalists the benefit of the doubt and say that they intertwined everybody's economies so and meshed them together that the thought of war would become untenable. And that sounds good on paper, but every single time somebody develops a weapon system or an economic plan to keep war from happening, war finds a way. To paraphrase Jeff Goldblum. Okay, so yeah, we're a little past an hour now, but this was just so engaging that I will take that bullet for you guys out there in the audience. We'll go a little past an hour. Dustin, why don't you go ahead and give everybody a closeout here with your information, where they can find you, give them a good reason to go over there and plop down $10 to support what you guys are doing, and just give us a nice little rundown.
Sure. Yeah. So you can always find me. I'm on Forward Observer. The website's forwardobserver.com. If you don't want to take the jump and start paying us money, which I totally understand, we're on YouTube every single day. Every morning at 9 a.m. Central Time, we do a program called the Daily Situational Awareness. Kind of take a look at top 4 or 5 items around the world, and as a little teaser for what we do behind the high side, where we don't have to censor ourselves quite as much for the YouTube audience, and have a little more freewheeling discussion. And I really appreciate everybody for watching, and thanks for having me on, man. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm glad you had fun. Once Ben brings us down, stick around. We'll do a little AAR afterwards. Everybody, thanks for watching so much. We got a lot of good engagement over there in the chats. Lots of good questions. Y'all are the reason we do this. We do this for you. We don't do this to listen to ourselves flap our gums. If you want to follow us and support us, we're on Facebook, YouTube, we're on Rumble, Instagram. We post some spicy memes over there, and of course, you can also go to Rhodes, the number 2 liberty.com. We got some nice t-shirts, mugs, other things like that you guys can buy. They look pretty good. You guys can go ahead and do that. So for me and Ben,